Hello and welcome to the Warrior Artist Podcast, a resource full of practical advice and insights into artist practice to inspire you on your creative journey. My name is Éadaoin Glynn, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Irish visual artist Bernadette Doolan. Bernadette is a self-taught painter and ceramicist whose work explores the vulnerability and resilience of the human condition as seen through the lens of childhood. She has exhibited extensively nationally and internationally, including Art Beijing, Nepal, the URHA, the Crawford Gallery in Cork, the Royal Ulster Academy, the Society of Women Artists London, and the Royal Institute of Oil Painters in the UK. She has also received awards from the Royal Ulster Academy and the Society of Women Artists in London. Bernadette, hello and welcome to the Warrior Artist Podcast. How are you today?
Hi, Éadaoin. I'm really good. Thank you. This should be interesting.
It's be very interesting.
Yeah.
You're very interesting. And thank you for giving your time. I want to ask you, did you always want to be an artist?
Oh, no, I don't. Did I always want to be an artist? I never thought I would end up being an artist. In school, looking back, art was my play, my escapism. All the other subjects were boring, but when it came to any subject that I could interject or put art into, I did. So my religion copy was like, it may as well have been an art copy. But in art class, I didn't feel good at art. I always felt that I didn't know what I was doing. So I suppose it was outside the classroom, outside school, that I would be like drawing on my clothes or designing jackets, or I got a sewing machine. I think I just fell into art. But no, I left school and I just went into retail. But even then in retail, I was like interested in the windows. I was interested in the display, the merchandising, how things looked good. I suppose it's always been feeding me along the line, but it wasn't like I always wanted to be an artist. I can't say I was one of those people like, oh, at 6, I was there drawing portraits of my parents. No, I wasn't.
And how did you fall into art?
We lived in Naas at the time, and I have a good friend, Colette, and she was doing this pottery course in the evening time. And she was coming home with these amazing bowls and things she'd made out of clay. And I was like, oh my God, like, you made that? And so I said, is there any space on the course? So I managed to get a space on the evening course and I went along and I fell in love with clay. I was like, this is amazing. But what I found even then was that I'd spend ages on the wheel trying to get something round. Then I'd take it off and I'd do so much to it, manipulating it, that it never looked like I'd spend an hour on the wheel trying to get it round. But I got that love for clay. And then I bought bags of clay, and when the kids were in bed at night, I'd take the clay out and sit at the kitchen table and I'd make stuff, and then I'd put it up on a shelf away from the kids. And then it was like, what am I going to do with all this? So I went on the hunt for a kiln. So I eventually got a kiln after a year of searching the buy and sell book every week. And we drove to the other side of Ireland to get this kiln and got the kiln. And then it was like, what am I going to do with it? So I bought a book on how to fire the kiln. Every night it was like, going to bed, myself, my husband, and Harry Fraser. That was the guy who wrote the book. So it was like trial and error. Put the stuff in, close the kiln, and be convinced I could smell burning during the night. Like convinced I had set the whole street on fire, and then go down the next morning and open it and go, whoa, or ooh. And so that's how the ceramic started. And then I wanted to do something for the homeless. And there was this call out from Brown Thomas years ago, maybe 2014 maybe, and it was to put on an exhibition for the homeless in BT2 on Grafton Street. And I remember thinking, oh, I'll apply for that. So I applied and I got selected, and they wanted 10 pieces, and I had said I'd do these wall pieces, and I got selected. They wanted 10, and literally the next day I went out, my kiln was broke, and I went, oh my God, what am I going to do? I've no money to get the kiln fixed. Even to get somebody out to look at it was going to be like 200 quid. And I was like, okay, I have 2 options. One is ring up and cancel and say, sorry, can't help out. Or B is get out of my comfort zone and do something different. And I never painted because I never thought I could paint or I was any good at it. And my father-in-law is an amazing artist, so I thought he's a really good artist. I won't do that. But I got 10 canvases and I worked in my husband's office at the time at home and painted these canvases, left them in, went on holidays. And it was the day that the exhibition finished. And I said, oh, God, I better ring up to organise collecting the pieces. And I rang up and I said, look, I need to organise someone to come in and collect them. And they said, oh, no, they all sold. And I was like, no, they sold. And I said, no, you got the name wrong. It's Bernadette Doolan, Dolan. And she said, they all sold. So I was like, no. They raised £40,000 at the time for Focus Ireland over 3 weeks with all these artists. And by getting out of my comfort zone, I actually got something in the end because I've been painting ever since. So if that hadn't happened, if my kiln hadn't have broken, and if I hadn't have stepped up to the cause or pulled back from it out of fear, I wouldn't be painting now. I'd still be just working in ceramics.
And those first paintings, what were they, oil, acrylic, and were they different to your paintings now?
The theme was home. They were small paintings. It was like I bridged the ceramics with the paint. So they were very three-dimensional. So I actually had clay built up on quite a few of them. So they were figurative, or they were like roomscapes. But a lot of them did have clay in them. And then I would use like a glue or a covering PVA, and then they were painted.
So that was your start. And then it sold, which must have been an amazing confidence boost. So you decide, okay, I'm going to do this now. I'm going to be a professional artist. Was that the next step?
I never think that. I think what happens is I just go with the flow, maybe. Things just happen. So for me, I worked in clay and I painted, but I do it for me. Ultimately, when I show up into the studio, I do it for me. I don't do it for, I hate to say it, I don't do it for the client. I walk into the studio for me. So it has always been about my enjoyment, my escapism, my development, my curiosity. So by doing that's always been feeding it. And I think by having that approach, it's allowed it to evolve. And I haven't gotten in there with constraints. Like I haven't woke up one day and said, this is what I'm going to be. Because then I've now put this, maybe a mold around it. And then maybe that kind of protects it too much. But no, it just happened. One thing led to another thing. Then maybe you get a bit more confident in something and then you apply it something else or you learn something new. So it's just opened up over the years.
And you're completely self-taught. Did you ever consider going back to art school, even as a mature student?
Yeah, I've had the imposter syndrome. I think I have a degree, master's, PhD in imposter syndrome. I can write the book. Yeah, I went through a few years of going, oh my God, I need that bit of paper. But actually, I needed that bit of paper for other people. For example, applying for funding. I noticed a tick box. Tick box was you had to have a degree in arts. And I was like, oh, so I couldn't apply for that funding because I couldn't tick that box. I don't have a degree in art. So from that point of view, I felt I need to get that piece of paper. So yeah, I did torment myself for a few years and even looked into it. And then I thought, God, I'd be interested in art therapy or that kind of angle. And I even looked that up and I could apply for that if I had a degree in horticulture. But I couldn't apply for it if I didn't have a degree. And I was thinking, Jesus, this isn't making sense. So anyway, I went through the whole thing and then I sat down with myself one day and I said, okay, if you're going to go and do a degree, what is it going to be in? I thought, oh God, I love designing things. I'm always in my head designing like industrial design, but I'm also this side thinking maybe I need to have a fine art degree. And then I was going, oh, what if I studied art? And then when I walk back into the studio, it's all different. I don't get out of the studio what I get out of now. And I thought, oh, what if I'm told, or what if things I pick up in art college is like a little slap? You can't do this or you can't do that. And I'm thinking, oh no, this is too precious. So I said, okay, what else am I interested in? So I was always interested in counseling and psychotherapy and psychology. And I thought, actually, do you know what? I think I'll do that. So I did. In 2015, I started my degree in counseling and psychotherapy. And I got that after 4 years, an honours degree. So I felt that tested the brain that I can actually do a degree. And I kept my art safe, if that makes sense. The studio still gives me what I wanted to get out of it in the first place. Kept it sacred.
Congratulations on your degree. I didn't know that. And that's a really interesting angle because I similarly self-taught and I've toyed with the idea of won't I go to art school? And I think I'd be curious what I'd learn or if I'd learned something, but it's a very interesting perspective that it may ruin what you have. I actually remember doing a Zoom meeting with the Backward Artist Network and we were presenting our work and it was my turn and somebody made a comment saying, if you'd gone to art school, that would have been knocked out of you. And I remember thinking, I don't know if that's praise or that's criticism in terms of that it was what I was on in my head. It was all this kind of creative, but it was nothing maybe serious enough. I don't know. It's interesting what you're saying about going for grants and there's maybe unwritten bias against if you haven't got your fine art degree that you can't tick that box. But obviously it hasn't held you back because you've won all these awards. So it's just now it doesn't matter. But that's really interesting that it might have ruined what you had, your intuition. You work intuitively in the studio, isn't that right?
I never have a plan. I tried that years ago when I used to just have my attic was my ceramics room at the time when the kids were really small. Imposter syndrome was taking off at this stage. And I was like, oh my God, maybe I should. What do real artists do? Oh, they have little sketchbooks. That's what I should do. And I remember thinking, okay, because up until this, I was going into the room and I was just taking the clay out. I was rolling it. I was in it. I was feeling it. And it would just happen, evolve. And afterwards, I'd have to go, oh, where did that come? What's that about? And then I thought, oh, maybe that's not the right way. So a real artist would do a sketch. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. So I got a little notebook and I did sketches. And then I'd sit down and I'd go, okay. And then it was like it was like somebody telling me you had homework to do. And you have 5 questions and they have to be answered this way. And then I realized actually by doing that, I've put down in stone nearly what I expect to get out of it. If I've sketched this particular figure, I felt it was like as if it now has to look like that. And if it doesn't and it goes off one way in the making of it, I failed. So I thought, oh, so that notebook ended up in the corner along with all the rest of them. And I just realized that the way I work is the way I work. And now I suppose I realize that we all have different ways of working. I think the going in and having a plan is me getting in the way. So I just show up. For me, it's about just showing up. Sometimes it's about just showing up and cleaning the studio, especially when you don't have something that's halfway through or you've been busy with something else and you're going, oh, I don't know what to do. And I go, how am I supposed to know what to do? Just show up. So I'll show up and I'll go in and I'll start tidying. And then within half an hour, I will have a paintbrush or charcoal in my hand and there will be something in front of me. And then it could go off and I know where I'm going next.
So you don't start with sketchbooks. So do you start on the canvas sketch or do you just go straight into paint?
It depends. So if it's a very big canvas, sometimes it's more just going in with an ink pencil just to maybe mark out space. It might be just a diagonal line or just to free up. More if it was a dance class, you'd be doing your little warm-up exercise. That's the closest I'd be getting to a warm-up exercise doing dance. But it'd be the pencil and then something happens. Then I know, and then it's the brush and I just go for it then.
I identify so much what you're saying. I've been to courses where I was told you should have a sketchbook and I don't. I go straight to paint.
The closest thing to a sketchbook or notes is if I'm out and I overhear somebody say something or lyrics of a song, I'll take my phone out and I'll put it in the notes. And that's enough then for me when I go to the studio. I remember the notes. What was it about that line? So then that's either transforms into a figurative. That's the extent of my note taking would be more just lyrics or maybe even watching TV and I'll see a still and I'll pause it and I'll take a photograph and then I'll go back to the photograph and it won't be about me wanting to paint that photograph, but it'll be me then sitting with the picture going, what was it about that? What was it that made me stop and take the picture? What was going through my mind? What emotions were there? What do I think was going on? What part do I relate to? Or what part do I think someone else could relate to? So that's my sketchbook, really.
There is also such a strong narrative in your work, Bernadette. I think it's very much influenced or inspired by childhood and nostalgia. And there's often elements of humour in there as well. Just wondering, why is it childhood? And do you ever paint adults?
Adults are boring, aren't we? God. Sorry to all the adults out there, disclaimer. But that's what it's about. For me, I'm using childhood as inspiration. But that's because I'm an expert at being a kid. So one thing I can say, I'm an expert at being a kid. I'm still learning how to be an adult. And I think we all are. I feel that as children, we learn our resilience. We learn about strength and vulnerability. Kids will fall down and they'll get right back up again and they'll have another go. Adults are like, oh, I better not do that. Didn't work out the last time. Fear. What if? And I think, God, if we tap into that kid that we know would take chances or would do it again, or just actually giggle and laugh at that moment when we messed up. So that's really what the work is about. While they might come across as children, obviously, there's also, for me, it's that kind of evolving child. For me, it's about the strength and the vulnerability and that tension between the two. I think the adult is in there, but I just think sometimes it's dressed up as the kid.
How long would you spend on a painting and do you work on multiple pieces at the same time? Because someone might think of a lovely freshness that looks like it just happened. And do some paintings just happen in one session or do you have to work on them to give them that sort of fresh vitality?
I would work very quick and it's about that mark. I go, oh, and then it's, oh, stop, walk away. What is it about that mark that I like or that challenges me? And then I look at the painting and I'll go, okay, I don't know where it's going next, but I need to preserve this part. And sometimes preserving that part is the walking away. And I could have maybe a painting there that initially started really quick, but I think, oh God, that's finished. And then you're thinking, oh, but is it really finished? So by walking away and coming back to it, and it could be there for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks on the wall, and I've done nothing else to it. And then I walk in one day and I go, it actually is finished. But it took that length of time to know that it's finished. I had this painting in the studio. Actually, I started with it on the floor and painted on the floor, and it was red, crimson red paint, watery. and it was on the back of a canvas, primed canvas, but I used the back of it because I liked that part better than the lovely primed side. I was painting it on the floor, and it was a big figurative piece. And just as I was walking off with the paint and the tub, this drop just fell off the brush right into the middle of the empty space, and it just splashed. And it was like in slow motion. I was like, oh my God. Because I thought when I was painting the figure that I'd do the background for something else. And I walked off and I went, oh. And I was like, oh, look at that little drop, that little splash. That kind of stopped the whole painting because I didn't know where it was going to go next. I didn't know what was to happen. And it was on the floor for, I'd say, about 5 weeks. Kept walking past it every day. And every time I'd go past, it was, remember me? So eventually I said, I'd stretch it. So I stretched it and put it up on the wall. And it was now probably another 4 weeks up on the wall, looking at me every day going, what's happening here? I had a show coming up in Goma in a couple of months' time. And I was like, God, I think it's finished. Do I have the balls or the nerve to leave this finished? Because there was literally very minimal marks that created this figure. But all the emotion was there and all the questions were there. So this day I went into the studio and I said, okay, today's the day I need to make up my mind if this is finished or not, or where it's going next. So I was in the studio and a knock on the door at 11 o'clock, and there was this couple and their little girl. And they said, can we come in? And I said, oh yeah, like where the studio is. If I don't have stuff all out on the floor, you're welcome to come in. And so they came in, and the girl she was about 8 or 9, and she just went straight to the back of the studio where this painting was. And she's looking at it. She just said, is this finished? I was dead honest. I said, actually, today's the day I need to decide if it is finished. I think it is. But I said, it's to go to an exhibition and I really don't know. And there's this 8-year-old standing there, the best curator, the best art critic, the best mentor. And she looked at me and she said, I think it is. And I went, thanks. Even when it was hanging in Goma and I'd look at it, I was like, I can see the 8-year-old standing beside it. And I think that in painting it, the 8-year-old in me was like, yeah, this excites me. Then the adult was saying, is it really finished? Questioning it. And then it took another 8-year-old to come back in and go, it actually is. And it was actually one of the paintings in the show that got such good comments because everyone, when they saw it, was drawn in. But then they all went to this splash and was like, I love that bit.
You're the dialogue between the rational side and your intuitive, your inner child who's painting and allowing that happy action to stay there. I've noticed your work is becoming more undone and you're leaving things looser. I'm just wondering, do you ever think you'd move more into abstraction?
I don't ever think that's a road I'll go down. Whereas I think if I was to go, oh, today I think I need to make them more abstract. Now I'm putting a demand. And then when there's a demand, there's like a criticism and an opportunity to fail. And it's more a case of if I make a mark and I might go, I like that, and it'd be more abstract. And then I'll go that way.
You're following the painting, really, where the painting is going.
Yeah.
And in the studio, what are your favorite tools, favorite paints?
I'm a real creature of habit. I think I have the same 5 colors that I just use. Although yesterday was a bizarre one because I started painting and there's yellow in it. And I'm like, where? What? Why? But you know what? That's part of the evolving. There might not be any traces of yellow in it by next week, but it's there now. And I think for me, sometimes it's about that uncomfortableness. Why did I put that in there? Now that's totally messed up all the colors because that's not going to sit with that one. And so it's like, in a way, being put into a classroom with a load of unruly kids. I now have this yellow. How do I tame this one down? I think my colors are normally crimson, Payne's grey, white, ochre, and burnt sienna. For a long time, sometimes it's just Payne's grey. I love the bleakness of Payne's grey, but yet there's more to it than just being a black or a blue. So for me, it's about the paint that allows for the emotion as well to come through. I use acrylic too. I do watercolour as well. I don't particularly have a favourite brand, although if I went down now, I realise they all actually are the same. But for me, it could be watercolour starting on a big canvas and playing with maybe the stuff that's not supposed to go together, cardboard. So for me, that's more that kind of interesting explorations that I like.
And you paint almost every day. How long are your studio sessions generally?
I can't say 9 to 5 because then I might as well be working in an office and then it's like controlled. But I could go into the studio and start something, or I could go into the studio and just sit there for the 4 hours and have not lifted a brush or a pencil. So for me, that's part of it as well, is the doing nothing. Then when I start to paint, it can be quite fast. So I think even the drive to the studio, the drive home, the sitting later on looking through the pictures, that's nearly all studio time without it being actually in the studio. Especially, I suppose, if I'm working at home from the home studio, you can dip in and out, like you can potter out there while you're waiting for the potatoes to boil and you go, oh, and you're having another look. But when I'm working in this studio for the bigger works down in Wexford, that's a bit more difficult. So when you close the door, you really are closing the door and you're not allowed back in until the next day. Sometimes I find that tough because sometimes it's the sneaking out, having just a little look and going back in to do the washing. And that feeds the next part that's going to go on.
You have two studios then. You have one in Wexford and you have a small one in the home.
For one of the house that I can work up 100 by 150. And then I got the big one in Wexford through the Wexford Arts Department, which has been brilliant. It's a creative space. There's about 6 or 8 studios in it. And I got that because I wanted to be able to work big. So my biggest now is 2 meters by 3 meters. Biggest so far, I keep saying. It's great because for that you have to be able to stand like right back. And just storage, because I do paint quite a lot and just to be able to store the work. And the big studio as well, it allows me to invite curators down or people down to view the work and to have the space to show it, which also helps in not damaging work because when you have stored in a small space, so many times you try and take stuff out and it's damaged. It's very important to have that bigger space to work as well.
You've been in lots of amazing exhibitions. Do you spend a lot of time on that kind of arts admin side, going for submissions, writing proposals, grants? Is that part of your week as well?
Oh, even when you say the word writing proposals and grants, I feel I need to take an antihistamine. I hate that part of it. I don't like it. And that's why I don't apply for many grants or proposals. The idea would be have somebody to do it for me, but that's not going to happen. I suppose for me, the O list was great when it comes to knowing about submissions that are coming up. I came across that a couple of years ago, probably when the RUA started using it first. I find that great because you get the notifications in of exhibitions that are coming up. And I don't apply for all of them. I look at ones that I think my work might fit in. I don't spend an awful lot of time on it. And sometimes I've missed out on a few that I probably should be a bit more diligent. But I have 1 or 2 friends who send me little messages and go, oh, this one's coming up. And so that's really cool.
And you recently exhibited in Oslo with the gallery Ramfjord. How did that come about?
I suppose I'd been following this gallery for a long time. And for me, I'm not in any galleries in Ireland. And that's not because, I don't want a gallery in Ireland. But for me, it was always about the relationship with the gallery is really important to me. I don't know if you remember the ads for Carlsberg years ago. And it said, if Carlsberg did it, it would probably be the best festival in town. And I suppose for me, I was waiting for the Carlsberg gallery. The one that allows you to evolve, the one that supports you and idealistic. But I've been following this gallery for years and I liked the artists and I liked the way the gallery worked and their ethos. And I suppose it was one of those that I just had up here as my wish list. And I got to be in the group show in February. So I went over for the opening and it was lovely. So I suppose it's finding the submission or the show or the opportunity that you think that the work fits into. Just trying to navigate a way in. And that's where Instagram is great because you've access to all these galleries and countries that you wouldn't have had before Instagram.
Is that how you discovered them, through Instagram?
That's how I've discovered quite a lot of places is Instagram, or even people who've bought from me is just through Instagram where they would have never seen the work in real life or they're in a different country. So it definitely is brilliant.
I wanted to ask you about pricing. We had a conversation about pricing when you gave me some advice when I was preparing for an art fair last winter. And what you said, it stayed with me. You said I should feel a little bit uncomfortable with my pricing.
Somebody had said this before, a mentor to somebody I know. I think it's a really good one to keep in mind when you're creative, because the difference between maybe, say if I make a product like Wellingtons, I know the price of the Wellington and how much it's costing and blah, 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 but it's a Wellington. Okay, I might be attached to the design, but it's a Wellington. That's a boot for anybody that doesn't know what it is. But I think there's a detachment. But I think when you're creative, there's a bit of us in it. We can go, oh my God, is that too expensive? Or, oh, I couldn't ask for that. Or, oh, because we're too close to it. And this mentor had said, when you're pricing, you need to feel a bit uncomfortable. It just means you're closer to getting what it's worth and your worth. So it's very easy to price something lower because you're thinking, oh God, I made it. So I just thought that was a really good piece of advice that I got years ago. So how did you find it when I said it to you?
Well, I had that real, definitely. It's tricky. Pricing is tricky. It's something I struggle with. What would you think is the best advice you got?
Oh, I think that one is probably one of the best advices because it encompasses a lot of things. I think if you feel uncomfortable, also shows that, well, maybe you need to work on your worth and owning what you do and understanding, for example, say if you're just pulling a price out of the top of your head and said, oh, I'm going to charge 10 grand for that. That's different. And I feel a bit uncomfortable with that. That's okay. That's not really where it's coming from. But I think it's a case of being able to stand beside the work and justify to yourself, I can stand beside it and go, no, I know why it is that price. And I think that encompasses your own self-worth, your own value to what you do, and all the experiences and the learnings that you're putting into the work, not just the 10, 20, 30 hours that you've sat making the work. I think it's very easy to not recognize your worth. So I think when it comes to advice, that's one that kind of just sit here on your shoulder, like the Tibetans have death on their shoulder, because it brings in lots of things. Are you suffering from imposter syndrome? Is that why you think it's too expensive, or it's too cheap, or whatever? So I think it wraps up a lot of things in it.
Would you have any other advice for any artists listening to this?
I think owning what you do and knowing why you do. And if there's any time where you're finding yourself going off in this direction and it's not sitting with you, for me, my gut is the best advisor ever. If I feel it in my gut and I go, either, oh, this doesn't feel good, or this one's exciting. But if you find that you're going down a road, or the work's going in a direction that doesn't really sit with you, questioning it why. So I think when you really know why you're doing what you're doing, then it makes it easier to make choices or to find the different opportunities, or whether it's the galleries or whatever it is that you want to do, that it fits properly. So the right fit across the board is important.
I know you've done some work with Christine Beech, the art critic and writer. How did that come about, and what are you doing with her?
I think it comes back to the gut thing again. Our local arts department, I was chatting one day to them and they had said, there's opportunities there for mentoring. And I was like, oh God, who would I want to be mentored by? So Christine Beech popped into my head and I was thinking, but she's a writer. And like that again, the questioning, I was thinking, oh God, mentor, maybe it should be somebody who's going to teach me how to paint. Maybe it's somebody who's going to teach me how to draw. I need to learn how to do anatomy properly. And I thought, that wouldn't float my boat. It just didn't excite me. But Christine kept coming into my head, and I had just read her book while I was away. And there was just something about it. And I said, this might be really weird. I said, but I was thinking Christine. I contacted Christine and she was all on for that. She's done mentoring before, but would have been with writers. So this was new ground for her and it was new ground for me. We've been working together and it's been really good. I think it's about trusting your gut, because even just through those conversations has brought different awareness around my work or my practice or just art in general.
It's a great idea because it's really hard to write about your work. So working with a writer, I think it's a really creative idea. And the book you're referring to is this Negative Space, her recent memoir. That's a beautifully written book. And how do you handle rejection? I know you don't go for many grants or you don't get that much rejection anymore.
No, I do. But I don't see them as rejection. Now, maybe that's delusional, but I reframe it as unselected. Sorry, but you weren't selected this time. It's that there's only 12 allowed at the party and there's 15 who have applied or who want to get in the door and they pick the 12. I try not to take it personally, but I do think because we are artists and we are creatives that there is a part of our soul and heart, if not a lot of it in there. I feel you need to put on a different hat when you're putting the work out there. And the reality is, yes, not everybody can get through, but I don't see it as a reflection that your work's not good enough. It's just maybe not the right fit. And going back to earlier on, finding or applying for the stuff that you think would be the right fit. An example of that is a couple of years ago, I applied to the New English Art Club in Britain and I got shortlisted and I was delighted. And I had to send off the paintings, 5 paintings. And one of the paintings was a self-portrait, which I have never done before. And that was another moment in the studio where I had imposter syndrome. What would a real artist do? Paint a portrait. But I got the rejection letter. You didn't get through this time. And not only that, but you have to get all your work back from England. I could sit there going, oh my God, that's after costing me this amount. And I didn't get in, but I don't go there. You can't go there because you have to dust yourself off and apply for the next one. But within a week, there was this call. I'd nearly missed it. I think they'd extended the deadline. And it was for the Ruth Borchardt Self-Portrait Prize in London. And I was like, I have a self-portrait. I didn't have one like 4 weeks ago because I had imposter syndrome and I painted one. So I submitted it and it was online. And I got the email to say, you were shortlisted. And I was like, excellent. But I had no idea what the Ruth Borchardt was. So that's what I tend to do quite a lot is I nearly blindly apply for these things, not knowing maybe how amazing or grand they are. Maybe if I did know, I probably wouldn't have applied because the imposter syndrome would say, you're not good enough. So anyway, I got shortlisted. And it wasn't until like maybe 2 weeks beforehand that it had gone up on the website. And then I was realizing, oh my God, like this is a big thing. The Ruth Borchardt, I was noticing names in there, Colin Davidson, Jonathan Yeo. And then somebody had said, I saw on their post, I'd been shortlisted for the prize. I had no idea. So we went over for the exhibition opening. And I had no idea that all those paintings that were in were actually for the prize that was going to be selected that night. Okay, I didn't win it, but it was amazing. For me, I was rejected from the New English Art Club with that painting, but it wasn't meant for that exhibition. It wasn't meant for that fit. Stepping back from that again was the previous couple of months in the studio when I was sitting there thinking, what would a real artist do? They'd paint a self-portrait. Oh, I don't do self-portraits. And I thought, sure, do it. And if it doesn't work out, you can bin it. You haven't told anybody. When I was painting and I was like, oh my God, that's starting to look like me. Then I went on to give myself a black eye. I was like, what's all that about? And then I realized afterwards, we tend to sabotage ourselves by believing things like I'm not a real artist or the imposter syndrome. By not listening to that voice, I did paint a painting and I've done a few self-portraits since.
I love that. Keep going, even if you're giving yourself a painting black eye.
If you listen to that voice, you start knocking yourself down. So why not flip it and do the opposite? We have it inside us to do that. People sometimes I'd see paintings and I have black eyes and they're like, oh my God, that poor girl, who beat them up? And I'm like, relax. No one beat them up. They're beating themselves up. This isn't about, the abusive relationship. It's about maybe not believing in yourself, or it's about that moment where you bite your lip and you suck it in and you go, no, I'm going to do this. So it's not necessarily about the sabotaging the moment. It's about changing it, about flipping it around and doing something different. You know, that saying, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. Change something and then the outcome is different.
Really believe that. That's wonderful. Have you any art heroes, somebody alive or dead that you would have loved to have met? And if you met them, what would you say to them?
I'd like to sit in Jenny Savile's studio and watch her paint. I think she's fabulous. And Egon Schiele, I loved his work. The line, I don't even think I'd like to talk. I'd like to just sit and watch. And for him, can I hear the chalk or the charcoal scraping off the paper? Because when I look at his drawings, that's what I feel. So I probably wouldn't even be looking for conversation. I could just be really quiet in the background and enjoy.
We mentioned Christine Beech's book. And are there any other books that you find inspiring, art books, or the books that you'd recommend?
There's two. One is Who Moved My Cheese? It's a great little book when it comes to business or the belief that's mine. Then you can realize, no, actually, it's not. And it can change and evolve. The other one is The Alchemist. I remember reading that years ago and I'm actually going to read it again this year on holidays because it keeps coming back up in my head recently. And then books like Brian Maguire, Gustav Klimt, book that I can just sit and look at and wonder what was going on that day in the studio.
So it's the inspiration behind the piece.
Yeah, but what if I was disappointed if I had a conversation with these people? A bit like going to art school. Oh God, what if I'm disappointed? Or what if that's ruined now?
And I know you had your solo exhibition in Source in Tipperary. Do you have anything else you're working on?
I'm going to do a show in Dublin, actually in November. I'm taking a space. I would have done Art Source for years in the RDS. And for me, it was like my shop window. A lot of my collectors and buyers would know where I'd be in November. I haven't done it in a few years now. And I just decided there a couple of months ago, I'm going to get a space. So I have a space for the same weekend that Art Source is on.
The space in Dublin, is that a gallery space you've taken or like an empty shop?
It's in Dunleary. It's like a house that they have exhibitions in and they do classes in. But if the gorge is 3-room, it'll be mine for the week. I'll obviously have to be there and man it. And it's an opportunity to have work in Dublin because the gallery scene is very limited and small. And for me, because I have had part of the exhibitions in Belfast, a lot of people come down to Art Source to see the work. So I feel like it gives me a base for the week. And to be able to get the work out of the studio, because it can be so easy to just keep working away and get into group shows and then realize, oh God, I haven't actually been out. So in a way, it's good because it gives you something to have to work towards.
Will you then market to your collectors? You let them know it's there. It's like a showcase for your work.
And I think that's important that you haven't got off the radar, that you do value visitors coming to see your work. Because for me, I always learn a lot about my work by the person looking at the work. Because I leave quite a lot of it out of my paintings and a lot of space in them, I always enjoy the interaction then when the viewer is standing in front and they start telling me what's going on. And I'm like, never thought of that. And that's because there's something coming up for them that they can relate to. And I'm going, whoa, yeah. For me, I enjoyed that part. And sometimes then I look at the painting and go, I never thought of that before. And then that feeds something else without them realizing it. They're adding another layer of paint to the painting that's there.
That's interesting because if you were in a normal group show or gallery, you don't get to have that experience. You're not manning it yourself. You're not present for those conversations. Whereas in something where you're manning yourself, like an art fair or a pop-up like this, you're interacting with the public and the viewers. You're getting to have these conversations. That's quite unique.
I think I never liked the whole conversation of money, and I'd rather not have to do that. But I think from the point of view of meeting the person that the work is going to go to and the excitement or the interest, to me, that's lovely. It shows that I care as opposed to just churning them out. Another pink one, another blue one. I couldn't do that. So yes, I find that part really enjoyable. And I think it's like a respect as well. I respect the person who's going to buy a piece of my work and move something at home so it fits in. I think that's such a privilege as an artist. I'm very thankful and very lucky.
Make sure you let us know about that. That sounds really interesting and very creative. And where can people find you if they want to see more of your work?
My new website's supposed to be going live this week. It's just a tidied up version. And Instagram, BernadetteDoolan.com, and Instagram, Bernadette Doolan Artist. And then the show in Dublin soon, and I'll put all that up as well.
The very best of luck at that. Wishing you every success with it. And for those who'd like to dive a little deeper, I'll include photos and links and references to everything we've mentioned in the blog post that accompanies this episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Warrior Artist. I'd be very grateful if you could subscribe, follow, rate, or even write a short review, as this really helps others find me. Wishing you all the best with your creative journey. Have a great week in the studio, and remember, you are a warrior artist.